So we just talked about the importance of lab documentation. Then what types of important documentation forms out there? Okay, so I told you you will be maintaining a lab notebook throughout this semester, right? So the lab notebook is the most relevant lab documentation this semester. So we'll talk about that a lot. That's a form of documentation that's important for you. And then there are another form called SOP. SOP stands for what? Standard Operating Procedures. Again, that's a kind of instruction on how you can carry out a task. Okay? Detailed step-by-step procedure is described in this documentation form. Okay, and then forms may be part of the SOP. It also gives you direction on how you carry out a task, and there are some blanks with the form that you can fill out the blanks once the task is performed. Okay, so they are kind of used together. Protocol is similar to SOP, so it's a kind of a direction for a task to be done. It's less formal than SOP. Okay, and the reports. Lab reports are another form of documentation you will have to learn how to write, and you will have to write at least 2 lab reports out of this class. So we'll talk about that later on. Okay, there are ways of writing a lab report. There are specific scientific format. Okay, it should have a title, abstract, introduction, method, result, conclusion, and the reference at the end. I'll give you instruction on how you write a report later on. Okay, and then equipment logbook. Again, if you have lab equipment or instrument, there are no logbooks placed next to it. So logbook will tell you the condition of the instrument, how that instrument is maintained or cleaned, calibrated, and serviced. All the records of that should be able to find, be there, so you can read them. And the users, all the users on the instrument should sign in and sign out when they start using it after they are done. So the record of the usage of the instrument should be found there as well. So by looking at the logbook, you can understand the condition of that instrument and the last user of the instrument. Okay, and the electronic documentation. These days, computer used a lot. So the SOP may be given to you, maybe in electronic form, because you can maybe carry a laptop computer or carry maybe some kind of an electronic device where you can look at the documentation, and even you can sign in and sign out there. So you should be able to know how to use the electronic documentation the same way as the paper form. Okay, labels. I told you, whatever the solutions you make, whatever the chemicals you use, they should all have the labels with the most important information about them. So when you make a chemical solution, you have to generate your own label for that chemical. Okay, training reports. Okay, the personnel working in the lab or working in a company, they should be qualified to be able to work in there. Okay, how do you prove that that person is qualified? Because that person has probably gone through necessary education, training, or should have that experience, right? So that's the evidence of personal qualification. So you have to maintain that training report wherever you go. And the batch record. So you're assuming that you're working for a company that's manufacturing a product. Maybe that product is used in patient care. Okay, so then how do you make sure that that product has the quality so it doesn't jeopardize the safety of the consumer who's using your product? Okay, how do you make sure that product has the right efficacy? It's working for whatever the treatment is used for. Okay, so everything you're doing to manufacture that product should be written down in a form of documentation. We call it a batch record. Okay, so the manufacturing process of your product is all written down. That's a batch record. Okay, regulatory submission. Again, so if you're manufacturing something, you have to submit the documentation to a regulatory agency like the FDA, and they'll review your documentation and see if there's enough quality on your product and the safety as well. And then they will give you approval on the use of the product in the US market. If they think your product does not meet the requirement, it's not safe, it doesn't have the efficacy, quality, then it may not give you the approval. Then you cannot sell it in the market, right? So that's important evidence of your quality, okay, you should have. And then release a final product record. Again, if you're working for a company, you have to have a final product record that goes with the product. So there are so many different documentation that are really important. So out of these, you will be practicing lab notebook and the reports in this course. So you should know how to generate those. So lab notebook, again, it's a chronological or a log or documentation of your work. So everything you do in the lab should be documented. Otherwise, there's no evidence of your work, right? So lab notebook is that documentation. So what do you do in the lab? All the procedures you are doing or following, all the observations you are making, okay, when you address a question you're trying to answer to through your experiment, then you have to write down all those, okay? And you need to write down kind of completely. So the complete information should be written in your lab notebook. So anybody reads your lab notebook that can not only understand what you have done, how you got the result data, they should be able to replicate what you have done by reading your lab notebook. So that is the rule of the thumb. Okay, so if anyone picks up your lab notebook and by reading your lab notebook, they should be able to replicate your work. Okay, that's the amount of detail that's required in your lab notebook writing. Then by saying so, if your handwriting is not good, you have to be careful. So at least your handwriting should be legible. So anybody should be able to read them. So when I collect your lab notebook for check and score, I should be able to read what your lab notebook said. So make sure you write it clean, okay? And all your raw data should be gathered and placed in your lab notebook. Okay, any handouts or any write-outs from your lab instrument, they should go in there. If I don't find those, you're not going to get credit for your work. Okay. Another important thing: never alter, never manipulate your scientific data. Okay, that's illegal. Okay, so that's a big problem. If you manipulate, if you change the data, then that's not allowed. Okay, it should not happen. That's period. Proper and consistent maintenance. Again, when you write your lab notebook, you write it as you carry out your experiment. Okay, if you just say, "Oh, I'm gonna write it later," you lose everything after a day or two. Okay, you have to write up your lab notebook the day you are performing the lab experiment. Okay, don't say that, "Oh, we're gonna write up lab notebook when I'm collecting it." No, that's not the right way. Okay. Then how do you write out your lab notebook? What things should be going in there? So this is a format and the requirements that should be found in your lab notebook. Number one, in each entry you should write down the date when you perform the experiment and the title of your experiment. Okay, that's the first thing should be found. Okay, and then short rationale why you are doing the experiment. Okay, maybe a few sentences, maybe 2-3 sentences. Okay, if it is a lab measurement using micropipetter, you say that. So I did, micropipette experiment to test my micropipette measurement consistency or accuracy by repeating, micropipetting 10 times at a set volume of maybe 500 microliter or something like that. Okay, so that's a rationale. So you have to provide that in the beginning, right after the title. So anyone reads your lab notebook should understand why you did that experiment. Okay, and then all the materials, methods, instruments you used for that experiment should be described in detail. So how detailed should that be? I told you the detail should be good enough so anybody who picks up your lab notebook should be able to read it and carry out the task the same way you did. Okay, that's the amount of detail that you required in this section. That's very important. Okay, so reproducibility should be guaranteed through your writing. Okay, and the data, of course, raw data, calculation, and the process data should be written in your lab notebook. And then based on your data, you will draw your observation. So provide your statement. It doesn't have to be long, but just provide what you found through your observation. If it's a micropipetting, since my calculation says, my percent error is very small, 0.2% whatever, it's acceptable, so my accuracy was good. And my consistency, my maybe coefficient variance, when I calculated, it was wide, maybe 5%, then, my consistency is not good. So that was observation. Okay, the conclusion. So you say that, so my pipetting skill, based on that, maybe accuracy was good, my consistency, there was some problem. So consistent means what? Are you doing it the same way every time when you pipette? So that's a consistent. So my skill is not good. So that is a conclusion. Maybe a couple sentences at the end. You provide that based on your observation. So that's the basic format of your lab notebook. I'm expecting to see this when I collect your lab notebook on all the experiments you carry out. All right, make sure you understand that. Okay, and then how to write a lab notebook, I told you. So normally you write in past tense in your sentences. Okay, it's not I am doing this right now. No, you're not doing it right now. You're writing it after the experiment is done. So you probably already did. So my micropipetting experiment was done this way. So it should be a past tense. Okay, and then when you write, you may make a mistake when you write. So if there's a mistake, do not tear up a page, because all your lab notebook pages should be numbered. So there's no space for anybody who will insert or remove your lab notebook. They should be all numbered. And then if you make a mistake, do not tear up your page. Instead, just draw a single line through on your mistake. Okay, and then make a correction, whatever the needed correction is. Okay, and then when you draw a single line through, okay, place your initial, okay, 2 alphabetic letter, your initial, and the date when you make that correction. So that makes sure that that is done by you, not someone else. Okay, that's a form of documentation. Make sure that the accuracy, authenticity of your writing. Okay, and the conclusion. So do not just restate result. Okay, so how is conclusion different from your result? The difference is the conclusion always draw it back to your original question, original hypothesis, and make a statement about that. Okay, so explain, answer how your result answers the main question or main hypothesis you're trying to support or disprove. Okay, so it's the same statement about your main question, main hypothesis. That's what conclusion is. Okay. And then I'm giving you a lab notebook packet. So again, in your course shell, you should be able to find that. So hold on a second. So in your home page, course shell screen, you'll be able to find this information, right? So lecture 1, lab 1. There should be a PowerPoint slide of your lecture 1, lab 1. And then these are all the relevant materials for your lab. So lab safety packet. Okay, metric practice batch record. I'll talk about the scientific measurement metrics conversion, so we'll use that. And the extra handouts, you may want to take a look at those. And the notebook packet, okay, and then micropipette accuracy batch record. So all the necessary documents are here. You can find them, you can download them, and you can, once you download it, you can print it out if you want to. Okay, they're all here. Okay. If you download and open your lab notebook packet, you will see this document. Okay, so it will give you some instruction on what you need to do. So instruction says the following: the number of entries found in somebody's lab notebook. Please review each section and write a critique about quality of each section. Remember, you have to critique the notebook entry, not the experiment itself. Okay, so entry 1, it says heading there's no title, right? It's obvious. Making cookies. Oh, maybe that's the title. Is that good enough? Making cookie. What kind of cookie? Is there enough information? So say the problem you see there. Okay.